This is a beautiful view up here. Oh yeah. Gotta take a look. Take a look to the bars of the last sites. So I guess I could talk about the upcoming Synchronet release. Hitting about an annual cadence for releases lately. I kind of missed New Year's as I was preparing the release. Around that time, I was hitting a lot of issues, new and old, just things I didn't like, and I had the time to work on those. And then, of course, I started thinking about new features, ideas, and other people submitting bug reports or feature requests, which that never really stops. It's always going on, but I wasn't gonna just set a hard stop and say no new features. Plus, of course, I'm always concerned. Oh, maybe this release isn't really significantly better than the last one. Like, it doesn't have that many new features or fixes that people would notice, and that's usually true. Most of the changes apply to a small percentage of the sysops and BBSs that use the software. They go unnoticed by the vast majority. But I like it when people are pleasantly surprised that things work better than they used to, or faster than they used to, or easier. But I've also been able to introduce some new, just like paradigms, around how you configure certain things, and supporting localization and being resilient to bot and scraping attacks, all this AI scraping going on. So lots of, especially web, if you have a web server, it just gets hammered these days. So putting the rate limiter in there was pretty cool. And there's actually a rate limiter on all the servers now, at least to some degree. The terminal server doesn't yet have a rate limiter. It doesn't really have the concept of a request. I did put a connection rate limiter in the services server, since it also doesn't really handle requests directly. The individual services do. And so you'd have to put a rate limiter in each service, kind of, or tie into it somehow. So I didn't put the same rate limiter in the same way that went in the mail server, the web server, the FTP server. Instead, it's just a connection server. So every time there's a TCP connection or UDP request, that kind of counts as like a request. Though technically it's not. There's a horse path down here. It even has signs specifically forbidding motor vehicles, but I don't know. It's kind of tempting. There's nobody down there. Might do it. Of course, this bike is loud. It won't be very stealth. It'd be much stealthier on an e-bike. This is that road. So let's see how quiet we can take this. Can we take it silent? That would be awesome. Of course, I don't have to drive street tires. It might be a little muddy. So ready? muddy and ready, but no horses. That's good. Whoa, a little slippy. Hey, see how quiet that is? It's a shortcut too. Yeah, we can do it quiet. Get through here. Alrighty. That's fun. So the biggest change in Synchronet version 3.21 is that a lot of the C source was changed to C++. Well, I mean, they were already C++ files, but they were really, more legacy C code than C++, but wrapped it in a single main C++ class called SPBS_T for type. Deuce was working on supporting more terminal types beyond, ANSI and PETSCI, getting prepared for some British Telecom terminal, I think, and he was, kind of dismayed at all the places that you have to touch to change how a terminal works. And, was saying, well, this should be abstracted, and, so it could be more generalized and encapsulated. And he did that in a C++ class, created instances of that, specialized for ANSI and PETSCI, and I think there's one for dumb terminals too. And they're supposed to work identically to version 3.20. No change in behavior, just more extensible as far as adding another terminal type. It could be VT52, Atari, whatever. So that was a big change in the code, even though it did not immediately provide any obvious benefit to the sysop or the user. It's sort of preparing for the future, if you will. And then in preparing for the next JavaScript library update, so we've been stuck on Spider Monkey 185 forever, and in preparing for that upgrade, we know that it only supports C++. So anything that was in strictly C had to be changed to C++, which for the most part is just renaming a file. But then you also have to deal with all the additional errors and warnings that can pop up because C++ is more strict about, especially around types. And so that was another reason for upgrading more of the code to C++. But that also provided the benefit of being able to create a single rate limiter class, for example, and use that in multiple servers. And being C++, it just gives you a little... You have to write less code when you use something, especially around resource management, memory allocation and freeing, and keeping track of state. It's possible to do it all in C. It's just it's a little cleaner in C++, especially for the caller, the user of the class. And that also led me to really analyzing the file usage upon connections to the servers, especially the filter files like ip.can file. That file can get really, really big. I think on my system it's 0.5 meg, and that's well pruned. I think I clear out old entries older than 30 days, and it's still that big. It just automatically filters a lot of clients that are trying to brute force attack accounts. And so rather than reading that file from disk every single time, for every single connection, instead it now caches it in RAM. And it's not just that file, it's, the host.can file, the IP silent can file, and then there's related exemption files too, and those are now cached as well. And then in the mail server, there's a spam block. That's a really big file on my system in particular. I think that's a 2 meg file. And that's just all the mail clients that have sent mail to a honeypot or I think there's other ways of getting listed in the spam block file, but there's that. There's the DNS blacklist exemptions. That can be a long file because every mail address that is successfully sent to becomes exempt from DNS blacklist, so that you can ensure they can respond. And so that's a big file, and that's also cached, which means it takes more memory. So you do have bigger memory requirements, but it's optional. You can disable that feature. I think it's enabled by default, but easy to disable. There's other new caching things going. Statistics are cached now, so you have like all these, like if you have like a stats file or with a bunch of @ codes with statistics, you can, those display a lot quicker. There's a lot less redundant reading of the stats files. These are little things that, especially if your data is stored on either slow media, slow disk, or if it's over like a network share, as I do, then you'll notice some things, kind of hiccup or slow down a little bit when displayed, and that should be less the case now because a lot more files are cached. Some other cool things I think are just, quality of life improvements, are like the seek support now when viewing files. You can now easily Cybertruck scroll, back and forward. Another is reading and using the source records from menu files. So if you edit your menu files with an ANSI editor in particular, puts sauce info in there, and it has a column width, and you're using column 80 in particular, then that is very helpful because it makes sure that the file displays correctly when displayed on a wider terminal in particular. Because there's this weird thing about using column 80 that most terminals will auto wrap at column 80. Well, it only auto wraps if it hits the 80th column. So if it's a wider terminal, then it's not going to auto wrap, and then you sort of end up with like half the menu on the left and half the menu to the, every other line of the menu right next to it. Or usually it's for like artwork, but occasionally people want to do this with menus or other display files. And the solution is to not wrap if the terminal auto wrapped on the 81st character. But you have to know that the file was sort of designed that way to begin with. Those are the expectations. And the source information is one way to do that. And it's just part of the file. So it's no magic with the file name or anything like that. It's just embedded in the ANSI, and it's put there by the ANSI editor, so it's kind of transparent to the sysop or the artist, whoever's working on the file. And it just solves another frequently asked question, and makes column 80 a little more useful. I was working on a game recently, Utopia, and I use column 80 quite a lot. Yeah, there's hundreds of other changes in Synchronet, version 3.21, and I'm sure I'll make another video where I talk about them.